Versatility, it's the ability to adapt to any driving situation or road condition that sets most SUVs apart from their sedan and hatchback counterparts. In these two 6 or 7-seater SUVs case, it's that added flexibility of the extra seating that sets them apart from their 5-seat counterparts. And if that's something that you're looking for in your next SUV, which one do you pick? Before we tell you which of these two SUVs to pick, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Overdrive YouTube channel for more auto content. If you were to go by road presence alone, the Safari is clearly the more imposing of the two, with a clear advantage in sheer size, with its key dimensions coming in significantly larger. On the road, the Safari gives full-size SUVs a run for their money, which could be a downside if you're looking for a 6 or 7-seater to primarily use in the city. The difference versus the Harrier is noticeable at the rear, a similar story with the Alcazar, which by itself is a good looker with its dark chrome detailing if you buy into the Creta's modern edgy design to begin with. However, where the Safari improves upon its 5-seater model in the looks department, we can't help but feel the Alcazar's extra length and wheelbase lends it a slightly stretched out estate look from certain angles, with the rear looking a little generic compared to the Creta's unique taillight design. Both ride on 18-inch wheels, and while the Alcazar's wheels are stunning, the Safari's Meteor 235/60 rubber lends it that go-anywhere look compared to the Alcazar's 215/55 section tires. So the Alcazar is based on the Creta, but what you do get is enough differentiation that makes the Alcazar feel just that little bit more premium. What you also get over the Safari are ventilated seats, a 360-degree camera system, which the Safari actually badly needs, even though the Safari does have the most spacious front seats. Now, despite the fact that you're sitting quite high up in the Safari, you don't feel like you're sitting on the car, which you could sometimes feel like in the Alcazar. Adjustability of everything is great, and even your sightlines down the bonnet are very good. Also, the fact that you've got nice soft touch materials on top of the dash and on the door cards does make it feel premium, along with the fact that you've got an interesting mix of textures and surfaces. What is better on the Alcazar is definitely space management. This is a hard space to get to. You've got 3 cup holders in here, but it depends on what kind of bottles or cups you're putting in here, and you've got large storage down here. I do wish Tata had given the Safari a little more than the reversing camera that it currently has, because it's not quite high resolution and the image gets a little grady and a little dark, and it makes it tough to see, and it also gets very mucky in these rains. To quickly gloss over the features list, both are fairly well loaded with premium audio systems, 9 speakers for the Safari, 8 for the Alcazar, connected tech, panoramic sunroofs, powered driver seats, to name just a few. But the Safari's smaller infotainment screen does feel like a bit of a letdown in comparison to the Alcazar's massive infotainment panel. The Alcazar also has full digital instrumentation with swish graphics and options to play with, ventilated seats, a much better reversing camera, onboard air purifier, extendable sun visors and more. Now, despite being the smaller car overall, Hyundai has managed to eke out just a little bit more wheelbase in the Alcazar, and as a result, the space utilization is actually quite good. Granted, it isn't as wide as the Safari, and you don't have quite as much max kneeroom and max headroom on offer, but with the space that is on offer, it's a comfortable place. Especially in the 6-seater variant, you get this fixed central armrest with storage, wireless phone charging, 2 cup holders and this fold-out table. And I think the biggest advantage is that you get these retractable window sun blinds. Of course, the seat itself is comfortable. It doesn't feel as expansive and as supportive as the Safari's rear seats. And the trick is that you can recline it for some extra comfort. Though of course, if you've got people back there, you'll have to find a compromise. The Safari is more of a climb into, while the Alcazar gets a running board to help you step into the cabin. Though your trousers will get soiled if you're not careful when you're stepping out of the Alcazar. In the second row of the Safari, you are sat quite high up, so you do get a good view out. and a great view out the windows, not to mention the extra spaciousness that's offered by the panoramic roof, and the fact that there's a lot more adjustment both in the recline as well as your seat fore and aft adjustment. And it's much easier to get to a happy compromise with someone in the third row, which, as we'll see, actually means that it's not just meant for kids. The potential advantage of the Alcazar is that in this six-seater variant, you tumble the seats to get to the third row, whereas in the Safari, you have to get into the third row via the center space between the two captain seats. It is a tight fit though, and like I said, you do need to find a compromise. So when you do push this seat forward to its medium setting of legroom for the second row, there is just about enough space for a kid back here. There are enough amenities back here though to make it a comfortable place to sit in. And of course, there is a little bit of the view left over from that panoramic sunroof. So one of the ways that you can get into the third row is pull the seat all the way forward and squeeze your way in to the third row. Or you take the easier route and you come in like that, though it'd be a little less elegant. Now, even with the second row pushed all the way back for max legroom in there, I've still got space back here and I can lean back. I've got headroom, and if you were to try and compromise with whoever's sitting in here, this is a completely comfortable place for someone of my height. I'm 5'11". So, like I said, it's not just for kids. While both cars get blower controls for the third row, the Alcazar has a separate rear AC control on the center console up front, which makes it easier to switch from a full family mode to traveling with fewer passengers. In the Safari, you will need to remind third row passengers to turn the AC off when they leave the car. Surprisingly, the Alcazar offers a more usable boot with both the third row up and the third row folded, though the six-seater's fixed central armrest gets in the way of loading larger cargo with the second row folded. Both come with 6 airbags on the top two variants, with the Alcazar edging ahead in the safety features list with its blind spot monitoring system, 360-degree camera, and front parking sensors. Though the Safari's automatic wipers are a boon in the monsoons, and it gets a brake disc wiping system. Coming to the engines and transmissions, these cars are quite different. We'll start with the larger engine Safari, which does have a sizable power and torque advantage. First off, it feels like the NVH characteristics of the Safari are better than the Alcazar. So what that means is that this engine does feel a lot more refined, and coupled with the fact that it's larger and more relaxed in regular driving, you barely even hear the engine at work. When you're ambling around in the city, you're likely to be sat between 15 and 2000 revs, which makes it very, very relaxed. Now, when you do ask for more from the engine, there is a growl, but it's not clattery, and I think that's an important distinction to make here. The 6-speed gearbox also feels like it's very well mated to this engine, and it knows exactly which gear to put you in exactly when you need it. It also feels like there's a much bigger supply of torque available at your beck and call, which makes the Safari quite a bit more fun to drive in the city. For a 7-seater, the Alcazar's 1.5-litre diesel might not seem like it'll cut it, especially when compared to the Safari's 2-litre diesel, but you do have to keep in mind that the Safari weighs 1.8 tons at the curb, while the Alcazar is significantly lighter at about 1.4 tons. Now, with that for context, the Alcazar's power deficit doesn't seem that large. It's down on power, it's down on torque, but in regular driving, you won't feel it, except for the fact that you'll find yourself revving up to about 2,500 RPM just to keep up with city traffic, and if you want to go quicker, you will find yourself north of that figure, closer to 3,500 RPM, when the engine does start to get quite vocal. Now, considering the times that we live in, it would be slightly irresponsible to test the pulling power of the Alcazar with 6 people on board, but we'd reckon that the Safari would do a better job fully loaded up. It does have the larger engine. Sure, would the Alcazar package be a lot more compelling with a 2-liter diesel, say the one that's in the Tucson? Yes, it would. But it would also drive the price up. It would become a lot more front heavy. And if this one's doing the job for most situations, I think it's a call that goes down pretty well, especially once you drive the Alcazar. Both these SUVs offer drive and traction modes that alter the driving experience, whether you're looking to eke out the best efficiency, the best performance, or tackle moderate off-road terrain. But without all-wheel drive options in either, with no news of such an option in the near future, you're quite limited in the kind of off-roading you can actually do. Coming to the numbers we got in our testing, the Safari is under a second quicker to the ton, with its power and torque advantage being evened out by its weight. But its roll-on performance is quicker and noticeably so when calling for overtakes. The Alcazar's braking performance is worth noting, with great braking distances and a stiffer feeling brake pedal than what we're used to in the Creta, for example, though the Safari's brakes are good in their own right. Coming to the all-important efficiency stakes, the figures reflect the difference in size both of the engine and the car itself. In the ride quality department, the Safari feels like it wins at certain speeds and the Alcazar feels a little better sorted at certain speeds, and I'm going to explain that. Begin with, at near any speed, the Safari feels like it can just gloss over anything that the road throws at it. That's down to the big meaty tires on the 18-inch wheels. The Alcazar rides on 18-inch wheels too, but a smaller, narrower tire. There are hints of rear axle shimmy, like a body-on-frame SUV at low speeds when you go through a ditch or a pothole, but overall there's an indestructible feeling that the Safari gives you, which really puts its ride quality just a notch above the Alcazar. The flip side is, at speeds between say about 30 to 60 kmph, which is your usual city speed, the Safari does feel like it has a little more in-body movement. And what I mean by that is that you feel a little more body movement through the wheel and through the seat at those speeds. Viewed with the Creta as context, the Alcazar feels like it drives just a little better. The ride feels just a little more plush and a little better sorted. And they've firmed it up actually to deal with the extra weight of all those extra passengers on board. But it's resulted in a car that only feels slightly stiff at low speeds, but ultimately feels a little more polished in the ride quality department. Now that means that the Alcazar drives pretty much like the Creta does. It's as easy to drive around the city and it feels more car-like than SUV, and that has its advantages and it has its drawbacks as well. Now, with the advantage being its maneuverability in the city, a slight drawback could be that it doesn't have that typical SUV ride quality of being able to smother over bad roads. The Alcazar's ride quality still is good, it's plush, but the edges of potholes still do catch down, with the slight trade-off being that the ride quality feels a little more settled at that all-important 30 to 60 kmph speed in the city. Now, some people have a natural tendency to dislike the slightly busy ride with those micro vibrations that the Safari brings to the table, and if you're the kind of person who doesn't appreciate that sort of full-size SUV ride, the Alcazar will serve you better. The steering on the Alcazar also feels better tuned in the sense that it's more consistent. At standstill and at parking speeds, it's very light and easy to twirl, and there is progressively more weight added as the speeds rise. In a set of corners, there's less body roll in the Alcazar, obviously being lower to the ground and less heavy. And you can sustain a good turn of pace in the Alcazar if you were so inclined. Though we suspect your rear seat passengers might not be as happy as you are, because the Alcazar does not deal with those mid-corner bumps with the same kind of aplomb that the Safari does. Now, while the steering itself is heavier, there's not a lot of feel, though it is a fairly quick rack, so making quick direction changes isn't too much of a chore. What you do have to keep in mind is that you're carrying 1.8 tons of mass quite high up. So you do feel body movement. So if you get on the brakes, you do feel dive. When you get on the throttle, you do feel some pitch. And of course, lane changes aren't that pronounced, but you feel them. Of course, ride quality and composure has always been a Tata strong suit, and that trait remains the Safari's strongest point. With a smallish price gap between the two, the Safari feels like it fits the bill of being a large, comfortable SUV with the ability to seat 6 or 7 passengers more of the time and more comfortably. In our minds, the trade-off of feel-good features and some extra polish and driving dynamics to the Alcazar is still worth it, considering the sheer size of the SUV you're getting. Of course, your usage needs to be considered. If the extra passengers are younger, the Alcazar might suit you better, especially if it's primarily for urban use. But for most everyone else, the versatility of the Safari makes it the better pick.